age, I didn't. I had to stay behind. So I was left out a lot. There was a lot of being left out.
Because of that?
That's only one of the situations. I also, by nature, I was very creative. I was very interested in, for instance, I grew up with French culture. Why? Because my mother had a huge library at home, and you didn't have TV and you didn't have radio. So if you wanted to be entertained, you either socialized or you read books. So I grew up reading my mother's collection of books, all the Molière plays. I read them all. Comtesse de Ségur, I read all her books. All these books, travel books and this and that, and I remember I read a book on Canada, and its first page it says, "Mosquitoes are not unknown in Canada." I said, "Oh no, we have mosquitoes in Egypt. We need them in Canada too." We used to sleep under mosquito nets, and anyhow, so fortunately, we got out of that and we left Egypt, and now we were supposed to, I sensed we were going to leave Egypt. We lived in our building, we lived in a beautiful penthouse there, which, was furnished with half our furniture from the other apartment, and that was plenty, it was 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, big living room, big dining room, and kitchen, and that was it, and a nice view on the park. So it was very nice. I mean, but it goes to show how big the first apartment was. That had half the furniture, that was sent here. So anyhow, I sensed that we were going to leave one day. I could feel and my parents didn't know until my father starts to say, "Well, I think we're finally finished with the tax people." He had to go every day to the tax office.
For how long?
With the bureaucracy, it took 3 years to get out.
3 years to finish with the tax people?
It took 3 years by the time the building was done, by the time the taxes were done, by the time the estate was done, by the time it was 3 years of stress. And I had my bar mitzvah just before we left. And so, and my sister got married that year too. I mean, there were so many events. It was difficult. It was, granted it was very nice, but it was an extremely difficult experience.
Now, did you, other than being shot,
yes,
did your family feel anti-Semitism? Was there any action? So tell me about it.
Well, I felt anti-Semitism from day one, since I was born. I was born in 46. Israel was born in 48. That was the bittersweet part of Israel. My father used to go back and forth to Israel regularly, every month almost. He would supply them with food. Food. And that was in the 40s. And he would take the night train and go from Cairo to Tel Aviv on the night train. It was that simple to go into Israel.
How long did it take?
How long did it take?
To get there, yeah.
Overnight.
That's it?
Yeah. It was like Montreal, New York.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had Ashkenazis from Israel who came to see him. His name was Behar'S from Tel Aviv. He came to see him at his office. My father was an import-export, all the kind of stuff, buying, selling. So Behar'S came to him and says, "You have a fine reputation. We trust you just based on your reputation. We would like you to supply us in Israel with food."
What food did he supply?
Very good question. What food did Israel need? Everything. Israel was a desert. My father and my mother decided in the 40s, when Israel was formed, they were going to go to Israel together with my grandfather, and they were going to put money in Israel. going to invest money in Israel. My father had been going back and forth to Israel all the time. And so he felt that, you know...
From what year?
Oh, in the 40s, during the war.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second World War.
Yeah, Second World War, yeah. And so he was pretty familiar with Israel. So they go, they take the night train and so on. My mother gets to Israel.
And that was legal?
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
It was direct flight.
Yes, yes. It was before Israel, I think it was Palestine at the time, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So they go, all three of them, and my mother looks at my father and she says, do you want us to invest our money in this piece of desert, a rock? He says, yeah, it's Israel. You know, land of milk and honey. Sure, my father was making a lot of money with Israel in those days. That's how I got to go to private school. But my mother looks at it, she says, are you sure? And my father says, yes, I'm sure. So they opened up an account with the Israel Discount Bank, which was a nice Sephardi man my father knew very well, called Rekanati. And he trusted them, again, trusts, as you were saying earlier. And so he trusted them, and
there was no signatures then. There was
yes,
no contract.
There was.
There was.
Oh yes, it was all in our name with accounts and everything. It was all done in order, and the money was there just in case one day if we ever had to live in Israel. We didn't want to live in Israel because it was very tough. First thing you would do is take me and put me into the army. Very, very tough. And so my mother said no. We're going to go live in Canada. Her family was there. We're going to live in Canada, not Israel. So they went to Israel. They plunked the money down, and wouldn't you know, turned out to be an excellent investment. Actually, I inherited part of my grandfather's inheritance. I wasn't used to inheritances. It wasn't in my, it wasn't in my psyche. In Egypt, yes. Here, no. It was you did things yourself. That's how it was done. But anyhow, my grandfather, when he died, had all these heirs. And my mother died a year after we arrived here. So I ended up by inheriting a third of the money that was in Israel. However, we didn't know about it. My father knew about it, but we didn't have proof and all that kind of stuff. My aunt Tanya Pardo was in Italy at a social gathering, and she meets a lady from the Israel Discount Bank. And she says, your name is Pardo? Yes. We're looking for his heirs. We're looking for Clement Pardo's heirs. And she says, you're looking at one. There's my husband, his son. She says, I don't believe this. This is unbelievable. This is great. So we ended up by getting, it wasn't huge, but whatever it was, because it was split so many ways. Whatever it was symbolic, and it shows you that investing in Israel was a good investment. And it was nice. It was very nice to... It was meaningful. Anyhow.
Why are you emotional about it?
Israel.
Oh, that's beautiful. So you go to Israel often?
Sometimes. Not enough.
That's beautiful.
It's beautiful. To me, it's meaningful. Yeah, that's for sure.
Okay, more about anti-Semitism, if you can tell me anything.
Anti-Semitism, we felt it everywhere.
Yeah.
We felt it everywhere. On the streets. They always would tell me, the kids would tell me, hey, you're not a real man. You're a Jew and you're a European. Real men are Egyptian. We play soccer. We don't have the fine manners that you have. You were brought up to be an aristocrat. That's what we want to get rid of. So, and it was true. I was brought up to be an aristocrat. I was taught to eat in a very elegant manner. I was taught how to set the table properly. I was taught how to entertain. I was taught how to hold a conversation. I was taught how to... I learned all these things. Matter of fact, even my friends would not converse with seniors. I would, because my friends had not been to British schools, and they didn't have the same upbringing that I had, because we were taught to hold a conversation with a senior.
Your friends, who were your friends?
My friends were Jewish mostly, French-speaking. They were the children of my mother's friends, or friends I had made at the club, but mainly a lot of the children of my parents' friends. Interestingly enough, rarely did I ever go fetch my own friends. Why? Because I didn't have to, number one. I was all the time surrounded by family and friends, and how much time can you spend? And I like to read, and I like to compose music. I was creative, so yeah. My musical retention. I played the accordion. I played all kinds of stuff. We had a piano in the house, so it was music was important to me. It was part of my culture. I like to go to plays and ballets and shows and folkloric dances, and I was interested in people's culture and where they came from and their family history. So to me, to go play with my friends, they were boring. They were boring because I found that with people who were older than me, they had things that they would tell me about their lives which fascinated me. They had traveled all over the world, and they had met people who were fascinating people. My contemporaries hadn't done that. So whenever kids weren't allowed, I was the exception. I was always allowed. My parents' friends loved to talk with me. My families, my aunts and my uncles, granted I was the firstborn son, the firstborn male on my father's side. So I was prima donna. I was like, oof, you name it, I'd go like this, and I wasn't demanding by nature, and I was a very simple guy, basically, as long as, of course, everything was done the way it was supposed to be done. Maybe it wasn't so simple. No, I was with my grandparents on my father's side, it was very simple. On my mother's side, it was a little bit more dressy, and I appreciated both. But getting back to the stresses of anti-Semitism, whenever we spoke about Israel, we never used the word Israel. We used the word chez nous. So this was the code word. Whenever somebody was around, we were very careful to speak in hushed tones. Matter of fact, you find that Moroccan Jews, even today, even the kids who were born here, will hush when they have a conversation one-to-one. And for instance, in the sauna, at the sanctuary where I belonged, the guys would get together in the sauna, and when you had two Moroccan guys, they would whisper to each other. The Canadians are pretty open, we talked. But the Moroccans, no, they hushed. So everything was done in code words. You always made sure, I never wore Magen David. No way. And if you wore one, you wore it inside your shirt. And eventually, I refused to wear one. I said, religion is mine. It's not to be shared. It's not to be publicized. And I don't want to be the target of. So, and that came very young. Even to this day, I only wear Magen David in Israel. Anyhow, the pressures came from even the staff.
In the house?
Yeah.
How?
I would hear them talk amongst each other and stuff like that, and they would say certain complimentary things about the people they worked for. They loved working for Jews. But you know, when they spoke about Israel, when they spoke about Jews in general, it was anti-Semitic. There were also...
Can you remember any of that?
Yeah, conversations was like, show me a Jew and I'll kill him. But
that's not a conversation.
But you know what? He's your employer. But that's different. He's my employer, and he's wonderful. That's how they are. That's part of the nature. And they're in difficult situations. They were in difficult situations themselves. You know, they were going through their own pressures. But the reality is that was constant jokes and stuff like that, anti-Jewish jokes.
So where are you hearing it, since you are in this exclusive school?
Yes, but I was allowed to go on my own. I went to downtown Cairo by myself. I was exposed. My parents didn't want me to be sheltered, didn't want to be exclusive. They wanted me to get out.
So when you were downtown Cairo, did people know who you are, that you're Jewish or whatever?
Oh, I stood out as being European, absolutely. So I heard conversations everywhere. You know, and I understood Arabic. I spoke Arabic, not fluently, but certainly enough to understand.
To know an insult.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they used to joke about insulting Jews all the time. I mean, here, if you ever dream of insulting a Jew, you're in deep trouble. Whereas over there, it was an honor.
Of course.
Yeah, well, you say of course, because you grew up in these surroundings, but the reality is that it was done all the time.
How about the media?
Constantly.
What happened in the media?
Everything was slanted against Israel, against the Jews, against this, against that. It was all...
You grew up with the Jamal Abdel Nasser.
I grew up with Gamal Abdel Nasser, absolutely. When the king was deposed, Mohammed Naguib came for 2 years, then Gamal Abdel Nasser deposed him and he replaced him. So I grew up with Gamal, with all his speech against Israel, against the Jews, against this, against that. And all the Jewish community was saying, well, you know, he's going to come around, don't worry, things will get better. They were afraid to leave. They were used to their standards of living. They were used to being happy in Egypt. They were used to the weather. A lot of them were assimilated. A lot of Jews did speak Arabic at home. They weren't internationals like us.
So how many generations were you in
Egypt? My mother's side, my great-grandfather was immigrant from Livorno in
yeah,
Italy.
Right. So three
and on my father's side, it was his father came from Izmir, Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the immigrants came from. And a lot of Jews lived in Izmir in Turkey.
Now, did your parents have any Muslim friends, Egyptian?
Yes, my father and my mother.
Who came to the house and socialized?
My father and my mother had friends everywhere, different nationalities, different...
Did they socialize, like come to your house, have dinner, go for dinner together at the club?
No. No, not really. Not really. Not close friends.
And at the club?
At the club? No, not really.
Were there Egyptian Muslims in the club?
The Egyptian Muslims who belonged to the club were...
The elite.
Yes. And those are the ones I was exposed to.
And you still experienced anti-Semitism from them?
No. No. Matter of fact, one of the people who attended my bar mitzvah was the former Pasha of King Farouk, who was the father of one of my sister's friends. My sister always had elite friends. She handpicked her friends even to today. Her friends are all handpicked. And that's the way it was. So whether they were Egyptian Muslim or the religion didn't make that much of a difference. The culture didn't make, it was the status that made a big difference.
Okay, now let's get to, you are leaving now. You
Ah.
sense you're going to be leaving.
I'm sensing
3 years in the waiting. You were trained. You were trained to do beds now. You were trained to cook.
Yeah.
How long were you trained for? That's 3 years?
We were in and out of the kitchen regularly. It was like, even my father, I'm going to make you toast, but his toasts were out of this world, to die for. His stuff was, my father was a very good cook. My mother didn't have to, she had staff. She knew, she was into all she would take the French cookbook and make things and so on. And she knew how to delegate extremely well. But her in the kitchen, I don't remember her being in the kitchen. The only time I remember her being in the kitchen was when it was a birthday party or something like that. They made cakes, decorated stuff and so on. But the cooks we had in Egypt were so good, they competed between themselves as to who had the best cook. So I grew up eating food. I mean, I go to restaurants here and now and I go, okay, do we have to eat out? It doesn't even come close. Even the restaurants in Egypt, the food was so good. It was because they came from different countries and they were usually the best. You got the best. They wanted to come to Egypt. It was like a very pleasant surrounding to live in. So, a few days before departure, I sensed we were going to leave. And my parents said to me, I saw the bags were being prepared. We had 22 bags. and 22 bags, I'm going to tell you a little story you'd appreciate, having been in the airline industry. 22 bags, and my parents said, we can't tell you exactly where we're going to leave, but stand by. They didn't want the word to get out. And so, 2 days before we left, my parents said, we're leaving the day after tomorrow, keep your mouth shut. Don't talk to anybody, anything, any member of the family. Do not discuss the subject. Be ready for, our plane leaves at 7 a.m., first class, from Cairo to Rome.
Now, were you given an ultimatum by the Egyptians to leave?
Yes. No, actually the Canadians gave us an ultimatum.
Oh.
We had put off our immigration so long that they said to us, either you take it or you leave it. So we took it.
But I thought Egypt gave you also.
Egypt, yes, they gave us a release. My father choreographed it extremely well, so that we were able to get a release from Egypt. I had 3 passports when I was born: Italian, French, and Egyptian. The Italian passport and the French passport my mother gave up. She didn't want us to go into the army. And we were coming to Canada anyhow. So the Egyptians gave us an ID card. That was it.
No passport.
No passports, which is just as well. I wouldn't want to have an Egyptian passport, thank you. As we say in Yiddish, a bigger sind. Which means, may you be happy. The sense of it is that, may you rot in hell. May you rot in hell. We left with the ID card, and we left in first class, and I was accustomed to this. I mean, the airplane that we left on was Air India. It was supposed to be KLM. I see this Air India plane coming, and I said, what's this? Somehow KLM did the booking, but we ended up on an Air India flight. That was the only one that had first class accommodations, and we had our own little compartment. It was before your time, in the old days, our own little compartment, and they served breakfast on a silver tray, and it was delicious, absolutely scrumptious. It was really nice. So that was a very nice experience. But saying goodbye to my relatives, because my father's family stayed behind. They hadn't. My mother's family left first. My father's family left afterwards.
What year was that?
We left in '59. We left September 59. We spent about 2 months in Europe, a month and a half or 2 in Europe, saying hello to the family and friends and so on, and then we came here. Now, we left, and when we left, my mother, before we left, my mother had taken chairs like that, actually a large armchair, flipped it over, opened up, and she put jewelry inside. And that furniture came uninsured, nothing from here. And when we arrived here, my mother opened it. It was in TMR in my aunt's garage. She made sure that furniture was not in a warehouse. And so my mother goes, she opens up the chair, and there was jewelry. So she was happy to find her jewelry. But look at the courage it took, huh? to just, and people who we know hid jewelry in their rectums.
Ow!
You'd be amazed. Women had all kinds of. I learned when I was a kid, the most courageous people during wartime are women. The men are out fighting, but the women are out doing all the maneuvering that takes a huge amount of courage. And they hid jewelry in the heels of their shoes. You should see what they did. It's unbelievable. They had friends who were my parents sent money using an airline pilot to Switzerland, and the airline pilots would hide it in their caps. And it was unbelievable. Not huge amounts, but whatever they could get out, they got out.
When you're talking about the women in the war, are
Yes.
you talking about Egyptian Jews, or
Yes.
are you talking about women in the war?
I would say that the ones I was exposed to, the fact that we lived in Egypt was sort of, coincidental, because all the women I was exposed to were from different ethnic origins. The Jews were from different ethnic origins. In my family, we had Ashkenazi Jews also. And my mother had friends whose parents were Ashkenazi Jews, immigrated to Egypt, all kinds of stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So they were European. They were European. So I would say, in answer to your question, I would say the European-oriented Jews or women were very, very courageous. It was in their genes. Now, I'll give you another example. When we were at the airport, I went to kiss goodbye my aunt, and she slipped something in my pocket. She says, "Give it to your mother when you get there, when you get on the other side." I managed somehow to go through customs. They let the kid in and out, I'm in Egypt, so what difference does it make? But the kid happened to have a bunch of jewelry in his pocket. I didn't know. She slid it in. She says, "Give it to your mother. She'll know what to do."
What kind of jewelry was it?
It was, I don't know, what kind of jewelry do women
like
have?
Like diamonds?
Yes, diamonds and, and gold and valuable jewelry. It was,
And it belonged to her or to your mom?
My mom had sent her stuff here.
Okay.
She had sent it in the furniture.
So your aunt sent her stuff with your mom?
Yes.
She smuggled her stuff out with you?
Through me. So I turned out to be an emissary of some kind. So anyhow, we get to Paris. We went to Rome first, visited Rome. We spent Rosh Hashanah at the synagogue in Rome, which was magnificent. It was I wish I were my age now so I could appreciate it even more. But I remember it very clearly. It was a beautiful synagogue, really nice. And then we visited friends and relatives and so on. Went to the French Riviera, the Italian Riviera, not the French Riviera, that time. Then we went to Milano. We almost lived in Milano because my father had business in Milano. So and we had an Italian passport. So hey, it could have been done. My mother said, "No, my family's in Canada. We're going to Canada." And we speak French, and so although she was fluent in Italian, both my parents were fluent in Italian. But so we get to Paris, and the airline says to us, "You have 22 pieces of luggage. Do you know how much that's going to cost you in excess luggage?" So they said, "We didn't pay excess luggage on the plane from Egypt." They said, "Well, that was Egypt. You're in Europe now. Welcome. Everything costs much more than in Egypt." So my